Namaste all, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are still in the chapter Knowledge by Identity and Separative Knowledge. We are on page 557, beginning with the line, "In our surface mind, we have no direct means of knowing."
We are meeting after 3 days, 2 days or 3 days. So we will see what he has said in the previous para. Okay, so I'll give you a summary of what he has said in the previous para. He is talking now, what we are going to read today is about the surface mind. That's our normal mind with our normal thoughts, our surface body and the surface vital and the surface mind. But in the previous para, he has been speaking about the intraconscient, or what he calls subliminal. And when you go in there, you have the capacity to be in contact with the universal. So you can know much more than when you are lodged in your body-mind life. Okay, so what he has said there in the previous one. But the most important power of the subliminal is the capacity to enter into the substance of others, even objects, without any outer or other instruments. Without instruments, I can straight away go into other people's minds, vitals, and even objects.
Now, many of the more realized souls in the ashram could do this.
I don't know.
I think Nolini
surely could have. Certainly he could have.
Nolini could have.
Yeah.
I think Aurobindo had that. Basu had.
And even if they can, they don't advertise it, so we
No,
don't
they
know
wouldn't
much.
advertise it, no.
There are some who have given their experiences and they have been published in the magazines, but not everybody. A handful of them, I know their names, but and some of them are wonderful. So, what he is saying, but the most important power of the subliminal is the capacity to enter into the substance of others, even objects, without any outer or other instruments. Consciousness contacts other consciousness directly and mixes with it, just as two glasses of water can be mixed and become one indistinguishable whole, so too can the consciousness, on account of its subtlety. Because the consciousness is subtle, my consciousness can mix with your consciousness, and I'll know what you are thinking, what you are emoting, what you are planning to do.
Now, what about objects? You said enter into objects.
Yeah, objects also. In other words, you know what it has been used for, who has touched it, what the vibrations are. You can contact the person who has touched that object also by just entering into its consciousness.
So now they're using DNA in police work.
Okay, so, but the DNA AI, you're talking of, oh, you mean,
Yeah.
Okay, DNA that way, okay, yeah. So too can the consciousness. Subtle physical, subtle substance, mental substance can mix intimately with their counterparts in others. My vital substance can mix with your vital substance. This interfusion becomes a normal law in the intraconscient. The power extends even to inanimate objects. You go into there and find out the circumstances and who has owned it, what the character of the person was.
Give us a little clarity on the interconscient related to the spiritual realms of consciousness.
Okay. The first thing you must be very clear in your mind is that the universe is there, whether you exist or not, the universe is there. And in the universe, there are from the lowest inconscient right up to the superconscient, all the planes are there. Sri Aurobindo calls them 7 planes of consciousness. You could divide into any number you want. Mother speaks of 12. You can even speak of more if you want. In fact, Sri Aurobindo himself says there are infinite number of planes. So these planes are arranged in a sequential manner, beginning from dense matter to subtle matter to the subtlest of matter.
Is it hierarchical?
Yeah.
Hierarchical manner?
Yeah, hierarchical in this sense that they are
Oneness.
gradation, yeah.
Yes.
There is a gradation. So, the human being is part of the universe, and the human being is a microcosm. He is a representative of the universe. Whatever is there in the universe is there in the human being. Therefore, if I can take my consciousness at a certain level and link it with the consciousness in the universe, then I have access to all the information that is there in the universe. So that is what he means by knowledge by identity. And if you want to, if you think of yourself, last time we discussed this, think of yourself as a house. I gave that last time. And all that is there in the universe is there in you. So the inconscient is there in you in the form of a cellar. The basement and the cellar. You can consider maybe the basement as your subconscious. Then in the first floor of your house is a normal surface consciousness, the ground floor. The first floor is probably the spiritual planes start there. And you can, this is your house, and if you want you can build more stories to that. How do you do that? By yoga. By yoga you can build more. I can build the higher mind in myself. I can build the element mind in myself. I can build the etc. the overmind and supermind. So this is the interrelation between the individual and the universe. So you can become the universal. If you lose your ego, you get the universal. So the intraconscient is when you go into your house, deep into your house. At the back, it's open to the sky. And open to the sky means in contact with the universe. So that's the intraconscient.
Or subliminal.
Or subliminal, or the inner being. Some call it the inner being. So there is also your inner mind, inner vital, inner physical, which is the subtle physical. And then behind that is the deep inside is the psychic being. The psychic being is the divine spark which is in every individual, but it has to grow and become conscious of itself. The psychic being, when it comes down, it plunges itself into the density of the inconscient. Slowly through evolution, it starts building itself up, and one day, in one life, it awakens. And when it awakens, your psychic, spiritual life can begin.
So what is the relation then of the spiritual realms of consciousness and the subliminal?
Yeah. There is no direct contact, because this is inside and that is above. It's like your inside your house at the back and the floors on top. They are not connected. It's exactly like that. But from once you go there, you develop the capacity of climbing and going up to the other floors. That's why the psychic being, when awake, it has a choice. It can build relations with the divine through devotion and love and be contented with that. Or it has a choice to even join itself to the self, to the spiritual planes of consciousness. In the spiritual planes of consciousness, you get knowledge. In the psychic, you get love and devotion for the divine. Okay? So,
Thank you.
So this is what Sundar said about the intraconscient. This interfusion becomes the normal law of the intraconscient. This power extends even to inanimate objects. The outer waking consciousness, our normal consciousness, does not possess this power on account of the grossness and the principle of division in matter. There is no unity, there is a break. My body is totally separate from yours. My vital is totally separate from yours. So I can't know. But if I go into the intraconscient, there is a link. Okay? So now, we read what he has to say today in this para that we are going to read now. In our surface mind, we have no direct means of knowing even other men who are of our own kind and have a similar mentality and are vitally and physically built on the same model. We can acquire a general knowledge of the human mind and the human body and apply it to them with the aid of the many constant and habitual outer signs of the human inner movements with which we are familiar. These summary judgments can be farther eked out or eked out, whatever you want. How do you pronounce it?
Eked out.
Eked out. Eked out by our experience of personal character and habits, by instinctive application of what self-knowledge we have to our understanding and judgment of others, by inference from speech and conduct, by insight of observation and insight of sympathy. But the results are always incomplete and very frequently deceptive. Our inferences are as often as not erroneous constructions, our interpretation of the outward signs a mistaken guesswork, our application of general knowledge or our self-knowledge baffled by elusive factors of personal difference, our very insight uncertain and unreliable. Human beings, therefore, live as strangers to each other, at best tied by very partial sympathy and mutual experience. We do not know enough. We do not know as well as we know ourselves, and that itself is very little. Even those nearest to us. But in the subliminal inner consciousness, it is possible to become directly aware of the thoughts and feelings around us, to feel their impact, to see their movements. To read a mind and a heart becomes less difficult, a less uncertain venture. There is a constant mental, vital, subtle physical interchange going on between all who meet or live together, of which they are themselves unaware, except insofar as its impacts and interpenetrations touch them as sensible results of speech and action and outer contact. For the most part, it is subtly and invisibly that this interchange takes place, for it acts indirectly, touching the subliminal parts and through them the outer nature. But when we grow conscious in these subliminal parts, that brings consciousness also of all this interaction and subjective interchange and intermingling, with the result that we need no longer be involuntary subjects of their impact and consequence, but can accept or reject, defend ourselves or isolate. At the same time, our action on others need no longer be ignorant or involuntary and often unintentionally harmful. It can be a conscious help, luminous interchange, and a fruitful accommodation, an approach towards an inner understanding or union, not as now a separative association with only a limited intimacy or unity, restricted by much non-understanding and often burdened or endangered by a mass of misunderstanding, of mutual misinterpretation and error. So, in the outer nature, when I am there, I don't know you. I can guess a little bit from your behavior and your speech and what you are yourself telling me, but it is still very uncertain whether what you are saying is and what I am understanding. what you are saying may not be the right truth about yourself also.
And often incorrect.
Yes. And then added to that is my misunderstanding. So that's one thing. But if you go into the intraconscient, the error becomes much less. And you can mix very easily with the others and understand their nature. Without any instrumentation, direct. That's what he's saying. This is how Mother used to help the sadhaks. She would take her consciousness, and if you surrender to her, even if you don't surrender, she will know. But if you surrender to her, she can work in you by becoming you. That's how they used to help.
But even those people who were just there to see her, had no interest in yoga, she could put something in them.
Of course she could. Yeah. But then there's also the resistance of the human being. Man is in love with his own ignorance, Srimdu says in Savitri. Okay, you remember that. So, he doesn't want to change. So he resists. And still Mother can put. And Mother will not force her influence on you if you don't want to accept. She won't. You have to ask for it, and then she will give you what you are capable of.
Exactly.
Okay. So that's what he is discussing here in this para. So I'll just read the summary to quickly see what he has said. In our surface nature, we do not know other humans as we know ourselves, however imperfectly, even though they are of the same species and of the same build in body, life, mind. We can know something of others. I am reading the text that I have written.
Yes. Summary.
We can know something of others through general knowledge and study of human nature and familiar personal habits. To this we may add judgment, inference, observation, even sympathy. But still, the results are incomplete, even erroneous and deceptive. Thus, human beings live like strangers, even with the best of friends, with mutual empathy and emotional closeness. But in the subliminal, the knowledge of others becomes near perfect. We can see all the universal as well as the individual forces and vibrations and understand their impact on us and on others. We see a constant, unceasing flow of forces, influences, physical, vital, mental, entering, affecting, modifying all behavior. Yet we are quite unaware of this vast cosmic interaction. But in the subliminal, understanding, control and manipulation of these forces becomes possible. We can even help others directly with full awareness of causes and effects. Involuntary effects of others' behavior on us and ours on them can now be made fully voluntary. This makes possible conscious help, luminous interchange and fruitful accommodation. So, whether I like it or not, or you are not aware of it, something of me will enter into you, something of you will enter into me involuntarily and ignorantly. We don't know. But now if you are in the intraconscient, you can make that conscious. That's how Mother can help you by doing this. That's what she does. She goes there, she is in that consciousness and she can help you.
Even now.
Yes. You have to just, her presence is there. You have to identify yourself with her. Call her and she will answer.
Go to the next paragraph.
Yeah. Equally important.
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
Equally important would be the change in our dealings with the impersonal forces of the world that surround us. So he has been talking of the forces of others' feelings, others' thoughts and all that, personal things. Now he is talking of the general impersonal forces in the world. All these forces are there. So impersonal force is clear. It's not originating from human beings. They are there, all these feelings are there. There is a plane of love, there is a plane of power, there is a plane of, just like there is wind. Wind is impersonal, it is there, it doesn't belong to anybody. So exactly in that way, all these feelings are, all these things are there.
But there are also those of darkness.
Yes, beginning from darkness right up to the highest lights. All these are there in the universe. And they are trying to enter into you, but you are so dense that they can't come into you unless you cooperate and want them to come into you. Okay, so equally important would be the change in our dealings with the impersonal forces of the world that surround us. These we know only by their results, by the little that we can seize of their visible action and consequence. Among them, it is mostly the physical world forces of which we have some knowledge, but we live constantly in the midst of a whirl of unseen mind forces and life forces of which we know nothing. We are not even aware of their existence. To all this unseen movement and action, the subliminal inner consciousness can open our awareness, for it has a knowledge of it by direct contact, by inner vision, by psychic sensitiveness. But at present, it can only enlighten our obtuse superficiality and outwardness by unexplained warnings, premonitions, attractions and repulsions, ideas, suggestions, obscure intuitions. The little it can get through imperfectly to the surface. The inner being not only contacts directly and concretely the immediate motive and movement of these universal forces and feels the results of their present action, but it can, to a certain extent, forecast or see ahead their farther action. There is a greater power in our subliminal parts to overcome the time barrier, to have the sense or feel the vibration of coming events, of distant happenings, even to look into the future. It is true that this knowledge proper to the subliminal being is not complete, for it's a mixture of knowledge and ignorance, and it is capable of erroneous as well as of true perception, since it works not by knowledge by identity, but by knowledge through direct contact, and this is also a separative knowledge, though more intimate even in separation than anything that is commanded by our surface nature. But the mixed capacity of the inner mental and vital nature for a greater ignorance, is that right? But the mixed capacity of the inner mental and inner vital nature for a greater ignorance as well as a greater knowledge can be cured by going still deeper behind it to the psychic entity which supports our individual life and body. There is indeed a soul personality, representative of this entity, already built up within us, which puts forward a fine psychic element in our natural being. But this finer factor in our normal makeup is not yet dominant and has only a limited action. Our soul is not the overt guide and master of our thought and acts. It has to rely on the mental, vital, physical instruments for self-expression and is constantly overpowered by our mind and life force. But if once it can succeed in remaining in constant communion with its own larger occult reality, and this can only happen when we go deep into our subliminal parts. It is no longer dependent. It can become powerful and sovereign, armed with an intrinsic spiritual perception of the truth of things and a spontaneous discernment which separates the truth from the falsehood of the ignorance and inconscience, distinguishes the divine and the undivine in the manifestation, and so can be the luminous leader of the other parts of nature. It is indeed when this happens that there can be the turning point towards an integral transformation and an integral knowledge. So, there is the surface mind, surface nature, there is the inner nature, and even deeper than is the psychic being. And once the psychic being opens, it has the power to change your outer nature. And it can also take you to the higher levels of consciousness.
But he also says that often the soul is not powerful enough.
That's right, that's our case.
Yeah.
All our normal human case
Exactly.
is that. The soul is there, but it doesn't have the power to change you. But when the psyche comes forward, it's almost like it takes you by the neck and makes you do the right thing. That's what happens. So, a very interesting para. He has explained everything very clearly. So, we can do two things. Either we can go through detail or I read the summary.
I think the summary is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's so clear what he's saying.
Very clear.
In the subliminal, we have access to impersonal cosmic forces around us. So, not personal forces, but impersonal forces. At present, we see only their results. Now that's interesting. I'll give you one example. There is Shakti. Force of the divine is everywhere. Do I see it? I don't. But I see it with their results. When there is a storm, it's a result of the Shakti. I see it. I see the sun and power to come. So that is the Shakti which is doing that work. So everything I see the results and understand. But I don't see the Shakti itself, I don't see.
Or the cause. The cause, but we
Yes,
see the effect.
that's right. I see only the effect.
Yes.
Okay. I see the river flowing. That's a result of Shakti. I can see that movement, but I don't see what is causing that river to flow. That's the interesting part. Okay. At present, we see only their results. Mostly, we see only physical cosmic forces, but they are also cosmic life forces, mind forces, of which we know nothing and are unaware of. All these, at present unseen forces, become visible and known to us in the subliminal. You can actually see them. Okay, so in the subliminal, direct contact, inner vision, and psychic sensitivity are ever present. But in the outer waking superficiality, we can get only vague warnings, premonitions, or obscure intuitions. It's very, this is not very uncommon. Somebody has to travel tomorrow by train and you get an uneasy feeling and you cancel it. And then you come to know next day that the train has had an accident or a bus. And if grace is there, the grace will not allow you to board the bus or the train. There have been cases like that in the ashram. There used to be a gentleman, I forget his name now, I think it was, he used to do purchasing for the ashram. He had to go to Madras and get things and he would do that. So one day he had to go by train, but somehow circumstances didn't allow him to go. And that train had an accident. So he was saved by the grace. So, you can get vague intimations also that this is not the right thing to do. But if you are the intraconscient, it's not vague intimations. Pakka knowledge you get that you don't do this, do that. Okay, so in the outer waking superficiality, we can get only vague warnings, premonitions, and obscure intuitions. In the intraconscient, we can see all cause, effect, and future results. Even Trikala Drishti becomes possible, although somewhat incomplete, because this is a region of knowledge and ignorance. But if you want real knowledge, you have to go up and not in. If you go in, you will get knowledge, but mix sometimes with.
So when Sri Aurobindo says you should concentrate above the head, but often he says also you should concentrate in the heart.
Yes, it depends on the nature of the person.
Exactly.
With whom he is more, the person is more familiar with or more easy. He feels I can concentrate more easily in the heart, fine,
Yes.
no problem. But normally Sri Aurobindo would prefer this sequence. First you have the psychic opening, then you have the spiritual opening, and then you become a candidate for the supramental opening. He has this big chapter in Life Divine, the triple transformation. First the psychic, then you are safe. There can be no mishaps. Then you get the spiritual consciousness awakening. The psychic transformation, the spiritual transformation, and finally the supramental transformation. So, but the nature of true and false can be eliminated if we plunge further into the psychic deeps of our being and contact the true soul, Antaryamin, the psychic being which is the true representative of the self in manifestation. But the psychic, pure, powerful and sovereign, has to depend on body, life, mind for its expression, and these hamper always the movements of the psychic. The psychic itself distinguishes truth from falsehood, divine from undivine. The psychic emergence is indeed the first step towards integral knowledge and integral transformation. That's what he said in this para. These are the dynamic functionings and pragmatic values of the subliminal cognition. But what concerns us in our present inquiry is to learn from its way of action the exact character of this deeper and larger cognition and how it is related to true knowledge. Its main character is a knowledge by the direct contact of consciousness with its object or of consciousness with other consciousness. But in the end, we discover that this power is an outcome of a secret knowledge by identity, a translation of it into a separative awareness of things. For, as in the indirect contact proper to our normal consciousness and surface cognition, it is the meeting or friction of the living being with the existence outside it that awakens the spark of conscious knowledge. So here it is some contact that sets in action a pre-existent secret knowledge and brings it to the surface. For consciousness is one in the subject and the object, in the contact of existence with existence. This identity brings to light or awakens in the self the dormant knowledge of this other self outside it. But while this pre-existent knowledge comes up in the surface mind as a knowledge acquired, it arises in the subliminal as a thing seen, caught from within, remembered as it were, or when it is fully intuitive, self-evident to the inner awareness, or it is taken in from the object contacted, but with an immediate response as to something intimately recognizable. In the surface consciousness, knowledge represents itself as a truth seen from outside, thrown on us from the object, or as a response to its touch on the sense, a perceptive reproduction of its objective actuality. Our surface mind is obliged to give to itself this account of its knowledge because the wall between itself and the outside world is pierced by the gates of sense, and it can catch through these gates the surface of outward objects, though not what is within them. But there is no such ready-made opening between itself and its own inner being. Since it is unable to see what is within its deeper self, or observe the process of the knowledge coming from within, it has no choice but to accept what it does see, the external object, as a cause of its knowledge. Thus, all our mental knowing of things represents itself to us as objective, a truth imposed on us from outside. Our knowledge is a reflection or responsive construction reproducing in us a figure or picture or a mental scheme of something that is not in our own being. In fact, it's a hidden deeper response to the contact, a response coming from within that throws up from there an inner knowledge of the object. The object being itself part of our larger self. The outside objects are part of ourselves in a larger self. But owing to the double veil, the veil between the inner self and our ignorant surface self, and the veil between the surface self and the object contacted, it's only an imperfect figure or representation of the inner knowledge that is formed on the surface. Quite a complicated...
Yes, it is.
But it's very interesting what he's saying. Basically what he's saying is that consciousness is the same everywhere. So if my consciousness can contact your consciousness, then it becomes my consciousness and I get knowledge. So this is possible in the intraconscient. With a little bit of error maybe, but it is possible. So that's exactly what he's saying. And it's all, ultimately it's all knowledge by identity. My consciousness identifies itself with the other consciousness, and then, so that's knowledge by identity, but it is still separative, direct knowledge. You remember the four, it's very important to remember the words.
Yes.
The first is separative, non-direct, indirect knowledge.
Indirect knowledge.
The second is separative but direct knowledge. And the third is knowledge by direct identity. Non-separative, direct knowledge, identity. So this is what he is describing. So in the intraconscient, direct but separative is possible. Okay, so we have discussed the practical results of the entry into the subliminal, but here we are concerned with the nature of knowledge. Essentially, all knowledge in the Supreme Being is by identity. In fact, there is no difference between knower, knowledge, known, since there is only one reality. We call this for convenience knowledge by identity. This separation that we see here is only superficial. It seems to be separate. I am separate from you, that table is separate from me, but this is superficial. Behind it all there is a unity which we can experience. We can understand mentally. Your body and my body are separate, but both are matter, which is one. So mentally I can understand that there is a commonness, but I don't see that. But in the in the intraconscient I can see that. I can actually see the oneness. Okay, so that's what he's saying. In the physical world, identity is lost and total division, separation of known and knower operates. So, indirect contact through senses is initiated by nature. Okay? I don't know you, but nature has very kindly given me 5 senses so that I can have some knowledge of you. That's what he says. In the subliminal, direct contact between knower and known is possible, and this we find to be a derivation from the original identity. Since consciousness of subject contacts the consciousness of object, which are the same, there is a spark of knowledge ignited in the knower. He uses a very interesting word, it is the friction. Your
spark.
consciousness and my consciousness, it joins, there's a friction and there's a spark of knowledge that comes out. That's what the word he has used. Very interesting. So, in the subliminal direct contact between knower and is possible, and this we find to be a derivation from the original identity. Since consciousness is subject, consciousness of subject contacts the consciousness of object, which is the same, there is a spark of knowledge ignited in the knower. Then this knowing can come in two ways. First, contents of object enter into the contents of subject, and knowledge is remembered within oneself. So, when I get the experience, oh, I knew about this but I had forgotten. This is often the what happens in spiritual experience when you get deeper knowledge. You say, oh, I knew it but I had forgotten about it. It's a remembrance because it's the same. You are going here and then you remember that it's there. That's first type. Then the second type is there. The contents of the object are seized by the subject as if in the object itself, outside its own being. So it can either come from inside or it can come from outside, the knowledge. In the waking superficial consciousness, knowledge is felt as if acquired, and a separation exists between object and subject. This normal mental knowledge is seen as outside. Our normal consciousness, when I study scientific things, I acquire knowledge. But in the spiritual knowledge, it is not an acquisition, it's a remembrance. That's what he's saying.
Very good. So next week we will begin on 561, this affiliation. Namaste all.